this.
All right, President Trump just arrived at the White House. He's talking with reporters. Let's watch.
He's done a terrible job. Look, I like Gavin Newsom. He's a nice guy, but he's grossly incompetent. Everybody knows. All you have to do is look at the little railroad he's building. It's about 100 times over budget. We're putting a flagpole over there. Under budget. I always do under budget.
What does your intel tell you about these people causing all the problems in LA? Are they people ICE is trying to deport, or are they professional agitators?
The people that are causing the problem are professional agitators. They're insurrectionists. They're bad people. They should be in jail. Thank you.
Mr. President, will you invoke the Insurrection Act?
Competent.
All right, so he took 2 questions from reporters. That was very quick. The president coming back just moments ago. We wanted to show you that. Guy.
So I think the highlight out of that was sort of feeding this feud now with Gavin Newsom, which is what Newsom seems to want out of all of this. And if we're going to go back to the LA riots, I do find it very interesting that the entire posture of the governor of California and the mayor of the city that was set on fire yesterday seems to be, we're going to soft pedal the violence and the people doing the violence and try to turn this into a story about the president of the United States, which is a very, very bizarre thing unless you are afraid to call out a significant element of your own base that is growing increasingly brazen and violent. And your clumsy, pathetic deflection is to blaming Trump and to blaming ICE, the people who are being attacked by these thugs. Right. I guess that's the plan.
You know what, Kaylee, that I really don't understand, because we saw Mayor Karen Bass, that's who you're talking about, and she came out late yesterday and said, look, she's against the violence, but Trump, 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 Trump. I'm paraphrasing. She may have only said Trump 5 times. But what I find interesting is right after L.A. suffered all that fire damage, it was horrible. She was the person. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Them kind of chasing her down as she was trying to make her way. She had gone abroad at the time when the announcements about the fires, the forecasts were coming up. I mean, she seems to always be in kind of the wrong place politically at the wrong time, too.
Yeah, and to say, you know, it's not unusual for things to descend into violence. Like that's not a quote you want out of your mouth as a politician, even if it's just a few people. Gavin Newsom, though, I'm interested in this just purely politically. Okay, I assume, Gavin Newsom, you care about your city and don't want to see it on fire. Let's just make that assumption. Okay, maybe you don't. Purely politically, why would you not look over to what Tim Walz did in Minnesota and be like, oh, he did this wrong. He didn't send the National Guard in time and a police precinct burned. I'm going to make a difference here. He's trying to rehabilitate his image as a leader ahead of 2028. How does this do it? These images are going to play. These same images were played against Tim Walz. You had the Associated Press asking questions of Tim Walz on this, doing fact checks of his record. They're going to do the same to you, Gavin Newsom. So change, if for no other reason, for pure politics.
And what about this politics, Emily? I mean, if a Republican president cleans it all up, and by the way, Jonathan Hunt reported a short time ago that they're planning another riot. So, and the president's already said, look, if we need to bring in those standing by at Camp Pendleton, our Marines, we will.
Well, and this time, then apparently there's pre-planning involved versus last time where that was the excuse or the reasoning given by, remember, LAPD, which said we didn't know that it was going to sort of devolve into this or evolve into this. I think it's sort of funny that the president qualified his statement about Gavin Newsom by saying, you know, I like the guy, but he's grossly incompetent, and then goes on to say all this stuff. But I do think that, let's say, war of words aside, it's actions and results that we're seeing playing out on our screen as to what is effective and what is not. So you want your precinct taken over for 23 days? That's the model in Seattle you don't do. You want law and order? You bring in the federal response. And again, to remind everyone, this is for basic immigration enforcement. And you are seeing the tantrum, the violence as a result, and the mischaracterization of who exactly that they are basic immigration enforcing against. There's no mention of the criminal rap sheets and the violence whatsoever of these people that they're trying to remove. It's only about who they are purporting to have removed and the schools and the like, and that's what you're getting. So heavy behavior requires a heavy hand, and it's lawful.
You know, Kaylee, it's interesting as you look at the screen. You often may wonder if sanctuary cities want to fly the American flag first. I think we get a lot of answers when we see how many flags are flying that are not American flags and things that are burning and people hurt.
Absolutely. And what's remarkable about this is that Trump actually threw Gavin Newsom a political lifeline by sending in the National Guard. And yet Democrats like Newsom have convinced themselves that the 10 to 20% of every single issue is the resounding opinion of the American public on anything from illegal immigration to men and women's sports, which we were just talking about. Gavin Newsom has apparently deluded himself into believing that the American people want violence in Los Angeles' streets, that they don't want the Trump administration to send violent criminals back to where they belong. It's just wrong. A CBS poll actually came out this weekend, and this was taken before the riots broke out, that found that 54% of the public approves of Trump's immigration agenda, including mass deportations. That number is going to be significantly higher as a result of Newsom's refusal to act on this. They do not want sanctuary counties. They do not want sanctuary cities. And as evidence of that fact, just think of a poll that was taken last month that found that even 2% of Democrats see Gavin Newsom as the face of the Democratic Party. Not even his own party wants him. So I agree with you, Kayleigh. I think his political aspirations are dead in the water, and he only has himself to blame.
Wait, has Rahm Emanuel come out and responded about this, by the way? Because that should be, per our ongoing discussion last week, no one sees Gavin Newsom as the head of the party. He only sees himself as that, right? But Rahm Emanuel is sort of rising up as the common sense voice, and I wonder if he has weighed in and said essentially like, yeah, this is exactly unacceptable, and yes, now the adults are in town, right? The voice of reason.
He'd be wise to distance himself, draw that cleave between him and Gavin Newsom and be like, I'm the real voice of common sense.
Right, and as Emily's pointing out, not just distance, but be vocal about it too.
So we want to give you a quick recap. Hi, Peter.
Yes, and there was a lot going on, including Gavin Newsom and the Attorney General in California suing President Trump as he was walking in. Newsom has had a lot to say about President Trump's decision to send the National Guard in. We had a chance to ask him just now. What do you make of the fact that he says, you want a civil war on the streets of America?
No, that's just the opposite. I don't want a civil war. A civil war would happen if you left it to people like him. And I liked him. You know, I always got along with him. Never had a problem with him. But he's grossly incompetent.
So President Trump seems completely unmoved by Newsom's taunts that he is now an authoritarian with this National Guard order. President Trump says he's been watching the coverage closely. He sees the peaceful scenes like this one. He also said he was watching very closely last night when it was not peaceful. And President Trump does not seem to be worried about this lawsuit over the National Guard order. He said, if anything, if there is a need, they will send more troops in.
Okay.
Martha.
Well, he wants peace on the streets there. We'll see where this goes tonight. Peter, thank you very much. Peter Ducey at the White House.
So Democrats are blaming President Trump for the anarchy in Los Angeles. Things are a little calmer today, but only after Trump called in the National Guard, and 500 Marines are now on standby. They're ready to take on any anti-ICE demonstrators who were burning cars, blocking freeways, and pelting police officers with objects. President Trump is slamming the destruction and is warning that California Governor Gavin Newsom could be arrested if he interferes with the ICE raids.
Gavin Newsom he's daring Tom Homan to come and arrest him. Should he do it? I would do it if I were Tom. I think it's great. Gavin likes him, but listen.
What do you make of the fact that he says, you want a civil war on the streets of America?
No, that's just the opposite. I don't want a civil war. A civil war would happen if you left it to people like him. And I liked him. You know, I always got along with him. Never had a problem with him. But he's grossly incompetent.
But Gavin Newsom, he's firing back. California is suing the federal government over the deployment of the National Guard, and Newsom has been daring Trump officials to arrest him.
Get your hands off these poor people. They're just trying to live their lives, man. Trying to live their lives, paying their taxes. What the hell is this guy? Come after me, arrest me. Let's just get it over with. Tough guy. So, Tom, arrest me. Let's go.
A little deja vu for you. Despite the clear images of burning cars, Democrats and the media kept insisting that the protests were mostly peaceful.
We are having an administration that's targeting peaceful protests.
A lot of these peaceful protests are being generated because the President of the United States is sowing chaos.
So I don't know what all this so-called violence is all about.
I'm worried about the safety of the people who are peacefully protesting.
The vast majority of protesters and demonstrators are peaceful. They're passionate.
And Maxine Waters weighed in here with this.
What are you going to do? You going to shoot some kid? He's afraid of you and run? You going to shoot an elected official? If you shoot me, you better shoot straight. I don't know why you're in my city. You did. The governor was not contacted.
All right, we are here on a Monday, big news day, and Jesse Waters said you were watching all of this over the weekend, had some thoughts.
Maxine, no relation. You can't blame U.S. soldiers for the violence. They're trying to lie, just like they lied about Joe Biden. This thing started on Friday, covered it Friday night on primetime, and then it went on into Saturday, and Karen had a stand-down order for the LAPD. She didn't do anything. She let her whole city burn. They only started calling it a riot when Trump mobilized the Guard because they got embarrassed. It was mostly peaceful on Friday and Saturday. When the Guard comes in, then all of a sudden Trump's triggering violence. It's crazy. They tell us time and time again, Dana, only the federal government can enforce immigration law. So when the federal government enforces immigration law, they break the law? No, 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 no. They are siding with foreign terrorists. If you are waving a flag of your country and you are burning the flag of the country you've come into, you're not an immigrant. You're an invader. And in a way, I'm glad this is happening. I'm glad the whole country gets to see this. This is mass migration laid bare. I'm glad we're seeing them throw rocks at cops. Not that they're doing it. I'm glad the country knows this is not a nuanced position. There's no middle ground here. You either have a law, you either have a border, or you have a country. And that's it. Now, you cannot have immigration without assimilation. Does this look like a melting pot to you? It doesn't look like a melting pot to me. And California has moved right. Every county in the country has moved right. So for the Democrats to side with these people, it's just crazy. There's money in the big, beautiful bill for ICE for these mass migration deportations. You got to do it. Absolutely have to do it. And the pictures that are coming out of this, when you have the Tesla terrorism and you have a guy with a flag over a burning vehicle, you're going to just jam that right down their throats in the midterm elections. And I don't know how the Democrats can survive siding with Mexican flag-waving arsonists.
Well, so, and also, Greg, they're burning the American flag and raising the Mexican flag.
It's disgusting. I mean, this attention is really cutting into Pride Month. Seriously, the only thing that should be flaming are the floats.
Exactly.
But, okay, so let's follow the cycle that Jesse talks about. The streets are unsafe, so the troops come in to intervene, and the Dems and media portray the intervention as an escalation. Haven't you seen this before? Yeah. They did this with the BLM riots. They did this with the protesters on campus when they would assault students, and then, oh, the police better not get there. Israel, accused of genocide after October 7th. You can even look at male trans in bathrooms. Men pretending to be women to go into bathrooms. It's not to avoid attention. It's to get attention, to act out. This is another example of acting out, and then when you react, they accuse you of the aggression. They're like the guy who sucker punches a bouncer and then gets his ass kicked, and then wants to press charges. I think the overarching goal here is to recalibrate risk. Obviously, getting violent, deadly illegals out of the country will lower your risk as a citizen, unless the process creates a counteroffensive that suggests a greater risk, meaning riots. So it's a form of extortion, and you may decide as a California citizen naively that, you know, it's just not worth the trouble. I don't want this mob coming for me. That's what they want to do. And you're right. It's like when you see I mean, a guy is waving the flag of the country he doesn't want to go back to. It's like a PETA activist wearing a fur coat. It doesn't make sense, and yet we're supposed to nod along and pretend that that's our problem. It's not our problem. These thoughts were, I've said this earlier last week, these thoughts aren't introduced into our heads. These people expect us to agree with this. No, we don't. We demand if you come here and you're messing with this country and you're waving a flag and you're saying F America, you're going to hear from us.
Yep. And I imagine, Kellyanne, well, I'd love your expertise on the political side of things or even on the law. Because Gavin Newsom is now suing the government saying Trump's not allowed to do this. But also, I would imagine that support for deportations will likely go up after people see images like this.
They've already been going up. Actually, the president is supportive in his deportations in everybody's polling. I think CBS, New York Times, they regret asking those questions when they actually see the data in return. They say, oh, we're not going to do that again. But that's changed over time because we all have 2 eyes and 2 ears that function. And we see what's happening. In addition to everything that's been said here that I agree with, I think people won't be fooled again. The summer of love, as the Democrats insisted it was, cost $1 billion plus that we know of in 2020. And you had all these people from the cappuccino counters and the country clubs Venmoing money to Black Lives Matter. I got to support them. I got to put the black square on my Instagram feed. And they got fooled. They got rooked because those folks bought mansions in California, we all saw. And what came of that? Now you're not going to see that. Instead, you see people saying, you know what? All I see, the peaceful folks are the law enforcement who are putting their lives on the line, who are out there trying to keep the peace, trying to stop the violence, watching the American flags being burnt while the Mexican flags are being waved. And I think Gavin Newsom wants to be arrested. I think he would be happy to put his hands out right now to Tom Homan or Donald Trump to be arrested. How else to distinguish oneself in a field of no presidential timber, but all wood chips going into 2028. And I think he wants to do that. He can go on a hunger or hair gel strike from prison and make himself the issue. Last thing, when Gavin Newsom said to that reporter, that friendly reporter to him, you know, man, these people are just trying to get about their day. These people are? The White House put out a rolling list of pictures and biographies today. Anybody can pull it. It's public information. Go to whitehouse.gov. Today, the White House shows you 15 to 20 examples with their names and their rap sheet of who the criminals are who are being deported. This is not Abuela, who's been working hard here for 52 years. These are hardened criminals, and it's public information. Everybody can see it. That's who Gavin Newsom is fighting for. The Democrats now are waving Mexican flags, and they have this Maryland dad, a gangbanger, human trafficker, who's being returned to the U.S. Be careful what you wish for. Everybody's grandmother was right. Being returned to the U.S. and is facing an indictment because for a decade he smuggled people, including children.
And Harold, what do you think about the politics of the Democrats suggesting that all of this that we're watching on air is Trump's fault?
So it's good to be back. Hope everybody had a good weekend. I don't agree with that, whoever's saying that. I think a couple things. One, you can't defend violence. I don't care what party you're in, what party you're not in. And especially you can't defend violence against law enforcement and first responders. To me, that's what is the most heartbreaking and most tragic. And then obviously you see the property damage and other things. So I'm hopeful that Democrats, Republicans alike, and I actually understand why President Trump considers, I guess we now learned in the last hour that Marines will be deployed. I think it's a risky situation, but when you see situations like this and you see this kind of violence in law enforcement being attacked, I think any president is within his means to do that. Two, to Democrats, stop taking the bait. These people whom are out committing these violent acts are not part of the people I think that many are trying to protect or defend or suggest that they deserve due process. These people deserve to be arrested. They deserve due process, but they deserve to be arrested, and those who refuse to refrain or show restraint, the police or law enforcement, if that matter, the military should act against. Finally, I think one of the challenges, and one of our in-house newspapers wrote about it today in an editorial, is how do we think about the hierarchy of deportations? I am in the camp, the overwhelming majority of Americans who believe that President Trump is right to deport hardened criminals, that we should find ways to find that people like the guy in Colorado who threw the Molotov cocktail. In fact, we should survey anybody, American or not an American, who's on our soil, who Googles how to make a Molotov cocktail. The question becomes, I think, and I think what some of these Democrats and even some Republicans, because if you look at the polling's mixed on the president on this, about who should we be deporting dishwashers and store clerks and hairdressers and 5-year-olds. Jesse corrected me and got me thinking about the school situation differently several weeks ago when he said, if you find that there's someone in a high school who's a member of a gang, you should be able to go into the school. I agree. But I don't think you should be able to go and get 4- and 5-year-olds. But that's just me talking. That's the issue here, I think. But when Gavin Newsom and others said they want to be arrested, when others say, why are you in our town? And Maxine Waters is like an aunt to me. The reason that people are, that the Marines and the president's deployed the National Guard is because the police are being attacked, because property is being destroyed, and because lives are being threatened. And if we as Americans put aside our partisan beliefs, if we can't agree on that, we've got worse problems than immigrants being here illegally.
Is she like an aunt?
She is.
Wow.
She's a dear.
So she's like no relation to
You should
Jesse,
be
but
blessed
like
to have
an
her
aunt
as your aunt.
to
She's a sweetheart of a woman.
Great aunts, and she's not one of them.
All right.
Live now on your screen, you can see pictures from Los Angeles. It's getting increasingly unruly and chaotic. There's been some blocking of city streets, and this is all still midday in Los Angeles. Let's talk now to ICE acting as Executive Associate Director of Enforcement and Removal Operations. It's Marcos Charles who's here with us on the Will Cain Show. Marcos, thank you for being with us here today. Can we start with where we left off? Let's talk about the crime of illegal immigration and what ICE is trying to do in enforcing our immigration laws. How do you respond to those that say this is, in fact, your fault, all this lawlessness?
Well, first off, thanks, Will, for having me on the show. Secondly, that's a complete false narrative. We are out enforcing federal immigration laws. It is against the law to come into the United States illegally, at USC 1325. There is no excuse for these individuals to be out here, the illegal aliens out on the street, the people that are preventing us from going out and making these arrests. I ask them, are these the people you want to protect? The criminals, the people that are breaking our laws, the rapists, the murderers, the people that are killing, the drunk drivers that are killing American citizens out on the streets of our country. Are these the people you want to protect?
I think we have the answer to that, Director. I think we have the answer to that not just from the people that are on the street, but the people that run Los Angeles and Mayor Karen Bass and the governor of California, Gavin Newsom. Now, Tom Homan has said that perhaps if you step in the way, Gavin Newsom should be arrested. Watch.
Gavin Newsom he's daring Tom Homan to come and arrest him. Should he do it? I would do it if I were Tom. I think it's great. Gavin likes the publicity, but I think it would be a great thing. He's done a terrible job. Look, I like Gavin Newsom. He's a nice guy, but he's grossly incompetent.
Now, Director, what would you say to Mayor Karen Bass or Gavin Newsom?
I would tell them, look, it's the sanctuary policies that the state and the city have that are causing us to go into the neighborhoods and look for these individuals, these illegal aliens, these criminal illegal aliens, to go out there in neighborhoods and make arrests. If they cooperated with the federal government and honored our detainers and would turn over these criminals to ICE, we could then transfer custody in a safe manner in a custodial fashion. But instead, we're being forced to go out into the street and make these arrests and disturbing the community in that way. But we are 100% enforcing the laws of the United States while we're doing it.
Newsom, by the way, responded to President Trump. He said the president of the United States just called for the arrest of a sitting governor. This is a day I would hope I would never see in America. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. This is a line we cannot cross as a nation. This is an unmistakable step toward authoritarianism. Director, it seems to be, as you mentioned at the top, as a false narrative, their narrative, that it is actually ICE and President Trump that are the risk to lawlessness in this country, that by enforcing the law, you have become the agents of lawlessness.
I completely disagree with that. We are, as I'll reiterate, we are enforcing the laws of the United States. It's the individuals out there in the streets that are creating the violence. We are not initiating any type of violence towards the community. It's the agitators, the organized agitators that are out there that are looking for an excuse to cause violence, burn vehicles on the street, attack law enforcement officers, whether it be federal, local, or state. They're the ones that are to blame for this. This is not an ICE problem. This is not a federal law issue. It is solely on these individuals that are aggressively attacking our officers.
Well, we wish the best of luck to your officers, by the way, not just in executing the law, enforcing the law, but in their safety in doing so as it gets increasingly dangerous out there in California and, for that matter, across the United States. Acting ICE Director Marcos Charles, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, sir.
Governor Ron DeSantis. Governor, great to have you with us this afternoon. You know, I'm curious what you thought when you watched these scenes of a man on a motorcycle waving a Mexican flag going around one of these burnt out vehicles. And I should point out that some of the video we just were watching, and we'll pull it up again in a second, is the clearing of these destroyed, burnt out Waymo vehicles that are part of the Los Angeles fleet. Your reaction to that?
Well, it's odd that you will have people who are in violation of our laws being in this country illegally, and they are protesting and even taking it beyond that because the federal government's actually just trying to enforce the law. And they're even burning American flags, which is the country they supposedly want to stay in, and yet they're waving flags of foreign countries, which is the countries they refuse to return to. So this is really just an upside down world. But part of the reason they're doing this reaction is because I think in places like California, which are sanctuary states, they've developed almost like a sense of entitlement to just ignore federal immigration laws. They put illegal aliens on health care programs, give them driver's license. They basically have welcomed people to come into California illegally over many, many years. And that was all in violation of federal law. So President Trump and Tom Homan, they're doing what they were elected to do, which is to enforce the laws of the land. And I think that they're right to be able to have National Guard protect these federal law enforcement personnel who are coming under attack, protect the installations that are coming under attack. And yes, there is a point where the mayor of Los Angeles fails, the governor fails. So the president not only has a right, he has a duty to protect the American people when the state and local officials won't do that.
So what did you think of that back and forth between Gavin Newsom and Tom Homan? Tom Homan said, I don't think that Newsom and Bass have stepped over the line yet. But anyone who stands in the way of federal law enforcement certainly runs that risk.
Well, look, I think Newsom's begging for something like that because I think he can parlay that into sympathy with the left wing of the Democratic Party. But I think it's a symptom of how far left this party has done, where you have major Democrats standing on the side of illegal aliens that are torching vehicles and causing these riots, rather than standing with the men and women of law enforcement who are trying to do their jobs. And it's one of the reasons why the Democratic Party is struggling so much nationally, because of people like the mayor and people like the governor.
You know, we all remember what happened in Minnesota, and we remember the accounts that it was mostly peaceful as we watched them abandon the 3rd precinct in Minneapolis. The police drove out, and it was then taken over by protesters. But this soundbite that I want to play right now it begins with Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles. This is the way they're responding to what has been unfolding on their streets. Watch this.
There was a protest that got a little unruly late at night.
We are having an administration that's targeting peaceful protest scenes of people peacefully protesting.
There have been no violence where anybody that was protesting hit anybody, shot anybody, threatened anybody. Nothing has happened.
I mean, we certainly saw violence, to be sure. What about the reaction of President Trump? Do you agree with the federalizing of California National Guard in this situation, Governor?
Of course. The locals are supposed to handle this. Like in Florida, if we had something, we'd have sheriffs and police chiefs that would handle it, and mayors. And if they didn't do it, then I would come in as governor and we would make sure it happened. Well, in California, both state and local have broken down. So he has a right to do that. And I think President Trump has a duty to do it. It's interesting because the clips you played, that's part of the reason California's hemorrhaged population over these last few years. I can tell you the people that have flooded into Florida from Minnesota after those BLM riots, from California, from New York City. Yes, we were open during COVID. Yes, we have no state income tax. Yes, we have a lot of things going for us. But the number one reason people would give is public safety, because you've seen officials like that mayor turn her back on the law-abiding citizens. You've seen the governor side with the criminal element and let inmates run the asylum. And that really strikes at the heart of people's ability to live their lives and prosper and protect their families. So I am not surprised to hear that rhetoric. It's obviously delusional. People remember what happened in Minnesota. They remember when you have a CNN reporter standing in front of a fire saying it's mostly peaceful, that's gaslighting. And so I think a lot of people are not going to be gaslit by this, and you will continue to see people leave Southern California if this is the type of governance they're getting.
Yeah. There's an irony and just an odd situation when you have the governor of California asking the president to give him back control of his own National Guard, which he failed to use and employ to keep the streets safe. So there's a lot of upside down world, as you said, and people flying Mexican flags who, are part of this protest against deportation to Mexico. So go figure. Governor, thanks for helping us sort it out today. It's always good to see you, sir. Thank you.
Now, violent anti-ICE rioters wreaking havoc in L.A., lighting countless vehicles on fire as they rebelled against federal immigration raids and attacked police officers and federal agents. You can see here on this exclusive video provided to Fox, rioters are chucking large rocks at incoming federal vehicles, putting their lives in danger, shattering glass, huge holes in the windshields. And the violence only got worse from there. Rioters were lighting fireworks and aiming them directly at law enforcement officers. The optics are astounding. Here are rioters waving the Mexican flag high in the air while parading the flame-ridden, smoke-filled street. And as they wave these Mexican flags in the air, rioters were also burning the American flag. But on cue, the left is referring to the events as peaceful.
The vast majority of protesters there have been peaceful.
We see peaceful protests launching in Los Angeles.
We're seeing these mass raids happening in areas that are peaceful.
It started peacefully. People were there to protest. They're there to protest the mass deportations that are happening. And so it was peaceful.
Now the Trump administration is vowing to put an end to the chaos. DHS posting these photos and saying, quote, order will be restored. And President Trump is warning that the U.S. won't take it.
When they spit at people, they spit. That's their new thing. They spit, and worse, you know what they throw at them, right? And when that happens, I have a little statement. They say, they spit, we hit. And I told them, nobody's going to spit on our police officers. Nobody's going to spit on our military, which they do as a common thing. They get up to them this far away, and then they start spitting in their face. That happens, they get hit very hard.
But Governor Gavin Newsom is vowing to fight back, calling on border czar Tom Homan to go ahead, arrest him.
Come after me, arrest me. Let's just get it over with. Tough guy. I don't give a damn. But I care about my community. I care about this community. The hell are they doing? These guys need to grow up. They need to stop. And we need to push back. And I'm sorry to be so clear, but that kind of bloviating is exhausting. So, Tom, arrest me. Let's go.
Yeah, bloviating is exhausting, Governor. Well, border czar Homan responded this morning on Fox and Friends that if Newsom breaks the law, he just might.
Then the reporter asked me, well, could Governor Newsom or Mayor Bass be arrested? I said, well, no one's above the law. If they cross the line and commit a crime, absolutely they can. So there was no discussion about arresting Newsom. And so, what he's done, he's failed that state. He waited 2 days of that city burning and people getting hurt, officers being assaulted before he made any declaration of an unlawful assembly. He's late to the game.
Guy, there's so much to unpack here, but it can become relatively simple when, as Tom Homan says, so essentially California communities were strengthened. They were weaned of violent illegal criminals, and then certain communities started fighting back violently. The police there, the LAPD, per the chief, became overwhelmed. And when Trump stepped in to help, apparently the governor says, we're going to sue you, and all of a sudden is on the side of, I guess, take your pick, illegal rapists, violent rioters. What's next?
So we were covering this live on the Big Weekend show last night, watching these pictures, these aerial images that were disgusting to watch. And it was breathtaking, frankly, to see virtually every Democrat in the country come out and say, this is mostly peaceful or just straight up peaceful. And the rioting is the fault of Donald Trump and ICE. It is so insulting. And you mentioned the fact that they were burning American flags while waving foreign flags. I've seen some people on the left on social media sort of tepidly saying, you know, that isn't helpful. That's not a great look or optics. We shouldn't really be doing it that way. No, I think they should exactly do it that way because it's honest. The people who are burning things, the people who are burning our flag, the people who are assaulting our federal officers, that is exactly the look that they're going for because it's what they believe. This is not a PR problem for them. It is a problem for the United States of America. And if the Democrats think that they're going to win this dispute and this debate by blaming all of this on Donald Trump or federal law enforcement, I think that they are deeply deluded.
And they're still cowards at the heart because they're still wearing masks while they do all of it, while they ride motorcycles and injure police officers, Kayleigh, while they are violent and don't have the heart to say, well, yeah, I do speak the truth and here's my face behind it. I also note, Kayleigh, that, of course, the vice president weighing in, calling this also peaceful. This statement here. I am appalled at what we are witnessing on the streets of our city. But guys, not appalled by the violence. Wait for what she's appalled for. She's appalled by the deploying of the National Guard, which is a dangerous escalation meant to promote chaos. This administration's actions are not about public safety, she says. They're about stoking fear of a community demanding dignity and due process. But, Kayleigh, I want to juxtapose this statement with exactly who, for example, were arrested in the ICE raids. Charges included murder in the second degree. It included rape. We'll pop it up there on the screen in a moment. We'll have it so that the viewers can see exactly the kind of people that were removed. So, again, whose side, thus, is the vice president, is the governor on, right? Again, the LAPD chief said, we are overwhelmed. And I venture that the communities before that were overwhelmed by violent illegals like that.
Kamala Harris's statement puts her on the side of lawlessness, a very comfortable place for the left. Tim Walz is there, Gavin Newsom is there, Karen Bass is there. Karen Bass, I watched her last night say live that the violence from a few, it's only been few, short of a few people, and there's nothing unusual about that. It should be unusual to have violence in this country. That is not something that we tolerate. I was press secretary during the so-called Summer of Love of 2020. During the Summer of Love, 2 people were killed in the CHOP zone, the lawless zone in Seattle. In the Summer of Love, David Dorn, a police officer, was killed. In the Summer of Love, you had officers who were being barricaded into courthouses as they were lit on fire in Portland. I had many conversations with President Trump about his use of the National Guard, and it was very clear to me what his philosophy was. He wants the states to take the lead. That's the 10th Amendment. They have the police power. When they don't take the lead, he will use the National Guard. He did that with St. John's Church when it was burning to the ground. If necessary, he is not afraid to pull in the military. He has the right to do that under the Insurrection Act. But here's what he won't do. When Tim Walz was leading in Minnesota, May 27th, the police chief in Minnesota back in 2020 said, we need the National Guard. Here's what Tim Walz did. He did it on a limited basis to protect state property, the State House. Guess what happened the night of the 28th? The 3rd precinct, police precinct in Minnesota was burnt to the ground. That is the consequence of not acting. So President Trump has learned from Tim Walz in the left. He's not going to let Gavin Newsom allow an hour to pass where we might lose the life of someone in the CHOP zone or like David Dorn or a building's going to burn to the ground. He will take action.
You know what yesterday was, Kayleigh? Yesterday was the exact anniversary of Seattle's East Precinct that was taken over and held for 23 days because that's what happens when you don't respond with an in-kind reaction to stamp it out.
Bingo.
Kayleigh McEnany mentioned tolerance, right? What we tolerate. And Paul Marlucki had an incredible tweet earlier sort of talking exactly about that, saying, well, essentially, is this a theoretical debate over what we are willing to tolerate, what our baseline is? And as a nation, our baseline should be a zero tolerance for burning cop cars and rioting, violently taking over freeways. This image is horrifying. So he posits that, so any argument over whether or not we should have the National Guard in there, of course it's political, and you will never be on the right side as long as you support President Trump, even though the community is what is burning now.
And it is astounding, to Guy's point, that the Democratic Party can't rally behind the very simple message of condemning vandalism, violence against law enforcement, and just chaos in Los Angeles' streets. And, you know, I think it's important to put this within the context of one of the larger legislative debates right now, which is the Big Beautiful Bill, because the Trump administration is citing the Big Beautiful Bill as exactly why we need that legislation. It's because of this. And, you know, I was watching those videos last night of bricks being thrown at the driver's windows of our law enforcement officers as they passed by. And I couldn't help but think to myself, you know what? I think we have bigger problems as a country than spending cuts. I think that we have bigger problems than the deficit. When you have thousands of people out in the streets questioning the very idea of our nation's sovereignty and whether we are allowed to enforce the rule of law, we need that bill. We need to deport these people, and we need to restore order.
Yeah, and you know, I'm from California, and I remember the horrific Watts riots, the violence playing out on live television, that those streets had devolved into complete anarchy and a complete assault on police officers, on anyone. And here we have the opportunity, per Trump, to actually stop it now. But it looks like the left and those political office holders, including Maxine Waters, that said, I hope those crowds get bigger. Well, as far as I'm concerned, that's incitement.
Well, but we've already seen that from her, because after the killing of George Floyd, I mean, she was famous for being, you know, on the stump and saying, get up in their faces. I mean, we didn't think that meant give them a kiss on the cheek. No. But I was curious today, and I asked former Secretary of State Pompeo about this. I asked Steve Hilton about it. Why the Mexican flag? And so, look, reportedly, the Mexican president now has said that she condemns and rebukes all the violence, even though she says even no matter what they're doing, they're not criminals. That's what she's speaking out about the protests in our country. Previously, it's being reported that, quote, if necessary, we will mobilize. We don't want taxes on remittance from our fellow countrymen from the U.S. to Mexico. I mean, I can't make heads or tails of where she stands, but she must see her flag. She must see Mexico. I mean, is this a situation now that's bigger than even us? And have we morphed into a national security situation? I would think that we would have, with now the thought that we have Marines standing by if this continues to go south. We need to take a pause here. It's not going to come from Democratic leadership. It will come from President Trump.
And we welcome that.
Joining us now, Jonathan Fahey, former Assistant Secretary in the Department of Homeland Security. Jonathan, a lot of people are saying that the president's deployment of the National Guard to Los Angeles is overreaction. How do you see it?
It's totally appropriate, and it's certainly appropriate now before things get even more out of hand. And when you see what's going on there, these peaceful protesters, as they call them, are really rioters, and they're instigated by the Democratic Party. And one of the most shameful things about this is President Trump cannot rely on the local leaders, meaning Mayor Bass and Gavin Newsom, to do their jobs to keep the federal agents safe and to keep the community safe. So he has a responsibility to keep not only the community, but these ICE agents who are just simply doing their jobs safe from these rioters that are throwing rocks at them, that are putting them in danger. And the Democrats have been ratcheting up the rhetoric on this so much that this was in many ways predictable, but very sad that this is going on.
There was that battle of the tweets, I guess you could say. Governor Newsom in California saying to President Trump, are you going to send in the National Guard the next time the Philadelphia Eagles win, with a shot of some of the fires burning in the streets the night the Eagles won the Super Bowl. Is there any comparison between the two, do you think?
Well, I don't really think so in a couple of ways. And one, it really shows how unserious Gavin Newsom is about this. And you would think a few months after they totally botched the handling of the fires, they would be more serious on these types of issues. But again, yeah, there's incidences after Super Bowls and sports wins, but these are planned, premeditated, and also don't seem to be ending. You know, Super Bowl is going to be a one-day event, and these seem to be, the violence is ratcheting up and it's increasing. And I think President Trump doesn't want another summer like the BLM summer, which was instigated by the Democrats, because part of their strategy is to create the chaos and then try to blame the chaos on President Trump. But their overall goal is just to prevent any deportations, and that's why they're fighting so hard on this. And these are in many ways just all different tactical moves that they're taking to prevent the bigger picture of preventing any deportations.
And the officers at ICE say that local law enforcement there in the Los Angeles area has been slow to offer them any help whatsoever.
Yeah, it's really sad, and I'm sure it's not because the rank and file don't want to help, but it's from leadership, probably from, you know, Karen Bass. And again, very sad that they would put the safety of their citizens, safety of federal agents behind their political ambitions and political agenda, because even most people in California don't want illegal alien criminals out on the street. But as a political matter within the Democratic Party, again, they're against any deportations. But I would suspect the rank and file are fully supportive of these ICE agents, and they just have their hands tied, unfortunately, because of politics.
A number of Democrat politicians are saying that ICE agents should not be allowed to wear masks, that they should be demasked so that everybody can identify them. What do you think about that idea?
You know, again, they're trying to put these agents in danger. And this idea that the only agents that ever wear masks is not true. This is very common in drug agents that are doing drug busts and things like that, because they're protecting the identity of agents so that they're not later put at risk, killed, or other things. So it's entirely appropriate, particularly with the ratcheting up of the rhetoric. Again, it's standard practice now for Democratic politicians to compare ICE agents to Nazis. So they've basically not only dehumanized them, but delegitimized them. So it's absolutely appropriate. Some of these people that act like it's never done before really don't know, because it is a common practice. I was a state prosecutor and a federal prosecutor for almost 20 years in total. And this is something that isn't new, and they should do what they need to do, meaning ICE, to protect their agents. That should be their highest priority, is protecting their agents, protecting the public, and that's what they're doing.
Meanwhile, as the president pursues this crackdown on illegal immigrants and deportations of many of them, a number of states are increasing their shield laws, if you will, for illegal immigrants, you know, to prevent ICE or any federal agency from grabbing these people or deporting them. Why?
Well, again, they want illegal aliens to stay in the country purely for politics. They're ultimately going to lose on both of these fronts. A lot of these laws are civilly invalid because of the supremacy clause, and a lot of them are actually encouraging alien harboring, which is a federal criminal violation. When you're doing things to shield illegal immigrants from deportation, that's alien harboring. So yeah, they're ratcheting it up, but I think there's going to be a day of reckoning for these sanctuary cities, and somebody's going to be made an example out of, meaning some city, and it's not going to be pleasant for them, but it's certainly well deserved, because by protecting illegal alien criminals, they put the citizens of their cities in danger, citizens of this country, because remember, Laken Riley's murderer was released by the sanctuary city of New York, and they're also putting these agents in danger and also making it more difficult for these arrests. So these sanctuary cities, these policies need to end, and the Trump administration is addressing them aggressively now, and I think it's going to be even more aggressive very shortly.
Meantime, Kilmar Abrego Garcia was sort of the poster child for the left. They wanted to make an example of him for having been wrongly deported. So now the Trump administration has brought him back to the U.S., but he's facing dozens of charges for human smuggling, among other things. What do you think about this guy being sort of the hero of the left?
Yeah, it really is surprising, and it's interesting how the left is certainly changed their tune, particularly Senator Van Hollen, because he's saying really it was just a due process issue that he was interested in. But if you look at his earlier comments, he was defaming the ICE agents, saying they abducted him, illegally abducted him, I think were his words. And also he was talking about him as a constituent. They were talking about a family man. So they were not talking about him in the terms of due process. They were talking about him as a constituent. But certainly after you look into this, particularly these new charges, what's really interesting is a lot of the key evidence came in 2022 when he was stopped with a bunch of illegal aliens in a van or a car. And this was referred to DHS and declined under the Biden administration that wouldn't prosecute virtually any immigration cases. So this is somebody should have been prosecuted 3 years ago.
We had up, and I think we'll probably get back to it, there we go, some live pictures of the National Guardsmen who are ready to go on patrol there in Los Angeles. It doesn't look like there is much activity there at the moment, but they're certainly going to be on standby on into, well, after sunset, I'm sure, when things really seem to start cooking there in Los Angeles. What do you say, Jonathan, to those members of the National Guard who have been posted to L.A. and some of those suburban areas by the president?
Well, I think we should thank them for doing this because they're keeping all of us safe. And again, what they're doing is keeping this from getting even more out of hand. So their presence there is going to be an amazing deterrent for any, future violence, and will keep that not only the community safe, it'll keep law enforcement safe, and it'll prevent more of these things happening in other cities, because I think other cities will decide maybe it makes more sense to enforce our laws, to support law enforcement, rather than have politically motivated riots that only seem to benefit politicians while the citizens suffered, like we had in the BLM summer.
Yeah, let's remember what happened to Minneapolis that year. Jonathan Fahey, thank you.
Thank you.
The Trump administration is taking action against violent anti-ICE rioters in Los Angeles. It's where we began this hour. Let's go deeper with yet another riot we know from Jonathan Hunt that's been planned. So another is coming. The administration put hundreds of National Guards or guardsmen and women on the ground there. And Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says the administration stepped in because California Governor Gavin Newsom did nothing.
Governor Newsom has proven that he makes bad decisions. The president knows that he makes bad decisions, and that's why the president chose the safety of this community over waiting for Governor Newsom to get some sanity. And that's one of the reasons why these National Guard soldiers are being federalized, so they can use their special skill set to keep peace. We're not going to let a repeat of 2020 happen.
The riots began over immigration customs and enforcement, arresting illegal immigrants in Los Angeles. That's their job. Well, here are some of the worst illegals who ICE took off the streets of L.A. One from Vietnam with a second-degree murder conviction, another from Mexico convicted of discharging a firearm and battery on a spouse, among other counts. Also from Mexico, a man convicted of sexual battery and theft. Another from the Philippines convicted of burglary and assault with the intent to rape. And that's just part of the list. And you'll see, there are 160 countries that people flowed in illegally from during the Biden administration. So you see, it's a mix of people coming from different places. DHS writes, quote, "These rioters in Los Angeles are fighting to keep rapists, murderers, and other violent criminals loose on Los Angeles streets. Instead of rioting, they should be thanking ICE officers every single day who wake up and make our community safer," end of quote. And the Wall Street Journal editorial board with a new piece, "The Deportation Wars Begin," they argue this is the tragedy of American immigration politics in 2025. The Biden administration's de facto open border policy created mayhem and costs that have changed the immigration debate for the worse. Border security was one of Trump's most popular issues last November in 24. Democrats should look in the mirror for giving him the political opening. In focus now, Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State, also a Fox News contributor. I'm so glad you're with me today. So I want to start with an open question because I mentioned this earlier to Steve Hilton. So reports are that the president of Mexico, Sheinbaum, is telling people here to go ahead and get out there and protest. Is that how normal relations go between countries?
Harris, thanks for having me on. No, that's outrageous. If those reports are true,
exactly.
No foreign leader should tell their foreign nationals in another country to go protest that other country. Indeed, Americans that are down in Mexico would not be permitted to protest inside of Mexico. That is both indecent and bad politics for her and bad for the Mexican people. It's bad for all of the citizens of Southern California who are just trying to live a peaceful life. To encourage these protests, to encourage this violence, and to not support President Trump's efforts to keep the place safe and secure seems inflammatory, if indeed this is what the president of Mexico did.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. I mean, it's unless you go to Mexico, you don't exactly know what's being said, but that was heavily reported. I'll keep watching for it. Let's move to this. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth posted that if the violence in L.A. continues, active duty Marines at Camp Pendleton will also be mobilized. Adding they are on high alert. The president responded to a question on that possibility yesterday. Let's watch.
What is the bar for sending Marines to
the bar is what I think it is. I mean, if we see danger to our country and to our citizens, we'll be very, very strong in terms of law and order. It's about law and order.
Sending active duty Marines on the table, sir. Secretary Hegseth.
We're going to see what we need.
So, did you ever anticipate, with the president answering the call of American voters in November, that he was going to take care of the crisis, the national security crisis that we had in our country with so many unvetted illegals here? Did you ever think we'd reach a point where we'd still be arguing over whether or not he should do that?
No, Harris, you've actually hit the nail on the head there. The fact that we're having this debate, the fact that there are those that are saying, nope, this is mostly peaceful. I think that's what I saw former Vice President Harris say again. The fact that we're having folks say, they encourage folks to go out and violently protest and are opposing the President of the United States, who is simply trying to keep people safe and secure, and to undo 4 years worth of policy that created enormous risk for our country. It's really quite something this debate's even being had today. This is such common sense.
Look, you talked about it. Let's go to it. Democrats roundly calling the riots peaceful protests, when in some cases we were watching it live and we could see that there was violence on the screen. Watch.
A lot of these peaceful protests are being generated because the President of the United States is sowing chaos and confusion.
We are having an administration that's targeting peaceful protests, people that are there to protest. The president is sending the National Guard because he doesn't like the scenes. He doesn't like the scenes of people peacefully protesting.
Yeah, you know, that's the problem when you have live side-by-side television. It's actually a deja vu of what we heard from Democrats in the media back in 2020 during the riots protesting the killing of George Floyd. They call those protests mostly peaceful, and as we saw, violent rioting and looting and even extreme violence against people like law enforcement happening in cities across the country. Your reaction?
Harris, we've seen this bad movie before, and the federal government under President Biden and the governor of Minnesota and other places in Washington State and the folks in Seattle didn't do the necessary. They have an obligation to keep the citizens of their city and state safe. They didn't do it. In this case, President Trump is going to get that fixed. He's going to get this right. This is not about the right of citizens to assemble as protected in our Constitution. This isn't about First Amendment freedoms. We saw the violence. You can see the fires. You can see what's taking place. And there is a duty to keep all of the citizens safe. And it's unfortunate that we have to take our Marines away from their primary mission of warfighting to do this. But we've got to keep Americans safe. And I think it is totally appropriate to use whatever means are lawful and necessary to protect these citizens of these places who want nothing to do with this violence, but who are being subjected to it by the radical left and those who simply want to stoke chaos inside of our country just because the president is trying to get our country safe again after 4 years of wide open borders.
Yeah, it's proof that politically Democrats don't have a message. Look, as Secretary of State, you went all over the world. Real quickly, how do you think our enemies look at this?
I think they see a strong president restoring law and order in the United States as an enormous positive for our country. And I think our adversaries say there is indeed a new model here in the United States, very different from what they've been dealing with for the last 4 years. And so I think our adversaries fear it, and I think our friends understand that they would never let these protests take place in their countries. They're glad that we're not going to either.
Great to have you in focus. Thank you.
Thank you, Harris. Bless you. Have a good day.
God bless you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.